bring in Republican Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi. He's on the Senate Armed Services Committee. He traveled this week with a bipartisan group of senators to Ukraine and met with Ukrainian President Zelensky. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it. CNN's Barbara Starr at the Pentagon learned today that military leaders are preparing a series of options for President Biden's approval to beef up the U.S. military presence in Eastern Europe, not necessarily in Ukraine. Do you think this might have the intended goal as a possible deterrence if Russia ultimately decides to invade?
Well, I think it might possibly be a deterrent, but also it would position us to be able to supply arms to our friends in Ukraine if we have to. There was a lot of mention in the previous segment about diplomacy. We always have to try diplomacy, but I do think now is the time to actually show that we're going to try to provide the weaponry to the Ukrainians to actually defend themselves.
What's your reaction to, I'm not sure if you heard of it, Matthew Chance, our reporter in Kiev, just got off the phone with a senior Ukrainian official who told CNN that his view is that these diplomatic talks between Secretary of State Blinken and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov are just a, quote, delay tactic for Putin.
They might very well be a delaying tactic. And you have to look at this in the context of what Russia has already done. In 2014, they took Crimea and they invaded the eastern part of Ukraine. Earlier, in 2008, they invaded two provinces in the Republic of Georgia. This country is being led by a man who wants to return to the evil empire that Ronald Reagan talked about. And when we talk about de-escalation, Jake, we're seeing further escalation on the part of Russia. They are moving elite troops into Belarus, very close to Kiev, the capital city, but also dangerously close to Poland, which is a NATO ally. And I can tell you, the Poles have got to be very, very mindful of that. It seems to me that now's the time to be moving some of our tanks into Poland, a little closer to that border, to be able to defend our NATO ally in case something goes wrong there.
Former Defense Secretary William Cohen told CNN today that Putin likely has a plan because he's keeping Russian troops along the Ukraine border. Take a listen.
Putin knows exactly what he wants to do, and he would not put 100,000 plus, perhaps even more today, troops on the border and say, oh, you're threatening me with sanctions. I guess I better pull my troops back and put them in the garrisons. He's going to get something out of this.
Do you think that Putin does have an end goal beyond invading Ukraine, that maybe he just wants, for instance, a U.S. NATO promise to not make Ukraine a NATO country? What do you think?
We should never make that promise, and particularly at the point of a gun. And we shouldn't be making that promise with regard to the Republic of Georgia either. So I have a lot of respect for Bill Cohen, and I think he probably knows what he's talking about. I think the reason 100,000 troops are amassed on the eastern border of Ukraine and they're bringing troops in to the compliant neighbor of Belarus is that Putin is up to something. It could be a massive attack on the capital city of Kiev. It could be an assassination attempt, some sort of a coup, or just a few miles. Our strong message of our delegation this weekend is that none of that is acceptable. And on a bipartisan basis, the Senate of the United States backs the ability of this little country to make their own determination as to whether to be a free market-oriented, Western-looking country or to be closer to the old Soviet Union. They have that right, and I think at least we gave a bipartisan message of support from the Senate this weekend.
You're on the Senate Armed Services Committee. President Biden said in December that the U.S. intervening unilaterally in Ukraine is not an option. Do you think he should reconsider that? Would you support either U.S. troops in Ukraine or U.S. troops in Ukraine as part of a larger NATO mission?
I think here's where the president makes mistakes, is when he publicly takes things off the table. It has been our policy since President Eisenhower, consistently for Republican and Democratic presidents alike, not to rule things out. I think our response should be, you will regret this. Frankly, Vladimir Putin is the neighborhood bully, and he's never gotten a bloody nose from anything he's ever done. The assassinations, the poisonings, the invasion of his neighbors. I do think the people of Ukraine this time will resist whatever happens, and it would be a mistake that Putin would regret for a long, long time.
Have you or any of your colleagues who were on this bipartisan trip to Ukraine, have any of you talked with President Biden or anyone at the White House about what you saw and what you heard while you were there?
Absolutely. We talked to him in a classified setting the very next morning after we got back, no question about it. And I think our message was that the Ukrainian people are not panicked, but they are resolved. They've been fighting the Russian troops since 2014, and they've lost thousands and thousands of Ukrainian troops. So this is really not new to them, but they're going to fight city by city, block to block, and house to house, rather than submit to Putin's Russia.
Well, let's hope it doesn't come to that. Republican Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi, thank you so much for your time, sir. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jake.